Welcome, everybody.
Awesome.
We're really glad to have you here. And I'm the host track, Steve Hughes, with the Working Families Party. I work on the Radical Education team. And I'm here mainly to support my colleague and comrade, Lexi Coburn, who is going to be presenting to you today. And just a few words about Lexi. We've only been working together for a short amount of time, but I think she's great. She is the National Radical Education Field Manager for the Working Families Party, and she comes to WFP having worked on the Warren campaign, having worked for Indivisible. And like I said, we just started working together recently, but I already know she's a powerhouse, and I will hand it over to you, Lexi. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Steve. And welcome, everyone. We are really glad to have you with us today. So, today, we are going to be talking about the parties we have. And in other words, when we look at the political system in this country, it is generally described as a two-party system, like one and two. So, for this short interactive session, we're going to unpack that a bit. So, let's go ahead and talk about the goals for this session. First, we want to learn a bit about the diversity of the power players that exist within the two parties, or at least the ones that are close to them. Second, we want to learn a little bit about the interests of those power players and what they do to advance those interests. And finally, we want to develop a multifaceted understanding of political power. Now, what do I mean about that? Well, we want to look at how power is more than just people or money, as important as those things are. It is also about controlling political infrastructure and really shaping, mending how people think. So let's dig a little deeper on that idea of developing a multifaceted understanding of power. Now, what gives a person or an organization political power? Now, if you have some ideas, I'd love to see them. Throw them in the chat. So, obviously, the first thing that gives someone political power is the ability to win votes or to deliver them for someone else, right? This is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to measuring that political power. Now, in our country, the ability to win votes is often closely associated with money, either having your own or being able to raise large amounts of it. But there is more to it beyond votes and money. Another way that people and organizations gain political power is by controlling political infrastructure. And that might mean controlling the levers of power inside one of the parties or inside Congress itself. This kind of power lets you put things on the political agenda, and it also lets you keep things off the agenda. Some of this may sound familiar to you. And finally, political power also makes itself visible in terms of the ability to shape ideas and the way people think about the big issues of the day. Some might say this is the ability to shape what the general public considers to be common sense at any given time. So let's say, what if we were to draw a picture of what political power in the United States look like? What might we draw? If you have some ideas, go ahead and put them in the chat. But as we do that, here is a picture of what we drew. It is a picture of the modern Republican and Democratic parties. Now, we are not going to go into this with great detail right now, but this picture shows some of the forces that live in these two parties. And we have everything from elected officials and former party organizations to the media to voting constituencies like white evangelicals for the Republicans or affluent liberals for the Democrats. We have donors and we have advocacy and movement organizations as well. So this picture is placed onto something called a power map. A power map is a tool that organizers often use to assess the power in their communities and to plan their organizing campaigns. It's a really big tool on strategy. So as you can see, it's set up as a grid. Along the bottom, along the horizontal axis, we show how aligned various power players are in our political system and where they are with us. Now, on the left side, let's say that we have people who believe that we should abolish all billionaires, which, yes. And on the right hand side, we have power players who believe that what's good for billionaires is good for all of us. Does everyone see that? Does everyone see the way that's put on the map? On the vertical axis, we can also see how much power these groups have. When you get closer to the top, the more powerful they are. And as you get closer to the bottom, the less powerful. Everyone with me so far? Give a moment. Okay. I'm going to trust that. I'm going to trust the silence. We could argue over where any one of the groups on this map should be. And for now, let's not quibble about these details. What we really want you to do is take a look at the broader patterns on this map. Now let's look at three larger groupings on the map. Now the first grouping in the upper right-hand corner is the Republican Party, because it's red. We want to argue that regardless of any particular election outcomes right now, the Republican Party is quite powerful in terms of having well-organized infrastructure and a clear and consistent worldview. That doesn't change usually. Now, the next grouping here is in the middle. This is what we would refer to in shorthand as the party establishment of the Democrats. These are the big donors, the bulk of elected officials, consultants, and also voting blocs like the affluent liberals that I mentioned earlier. And the final group here in the green is where we live. This is where movement organizations and left-wing elected officials live. It's also where the multiracial working class lives as well. So there's a couple of things you might be noticing from this picture. First of all, note that there are some overlap between the circles. Now, we're not talking about solid boundaries. That doesn't really exist here. Just simply groups that tend to cluster together in terms of ideology and the power to enact that ideology. Now, the other thing that is also pretty obvious by looking at this is that our folks don't have a lot of power. There's not a lot here. This is true compared to Republicans. But it is also true compared to the forces that make up the establishment of the Democratic Party. Now, so there's always more than one thing, right? So we just looked at that version of the power map. Now we're going to look at this version of the power map. This is personally my favorite. We want to get more concrete with all this. We're going to make our own effort to place onto this map several real life power players. Now, if we have more time, we would map both the Republicans and the Democrats, but for now, we're going to focus on the Democrats because they are more complex. They're in a more complex situation in terms of our understanding of how political power should be distributed. So, we're going to get started with someone that is super familiar to most of you, if not all of you, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC, as she is often called. Now, as you can see on this slide, we are laying out two things. What are her interests and what means does she have to achieve those interests? So, for example, AOC's interest is pursuing policies for the many, not the few, which sounds real familiar to me. In terms of her means, she has a huge social media following at her disposal to achieve her interests. At any given point in time, she's on TikTok or Twitter talking about policies. Now, I'm going to give you a few seconds to look at her and just look at her, but also look at her card and to think about where on the power map you think she should go. I'll give you all a moment to do that. All right, so now we're back here at our power map. Now we're going to try a little bit of an experiment. Let's hope it works. We're going to work together to place AOC on our power map. You, the participants, need to weigh in here. The way this is going to work is that you're going to use the chat and you're going to have the option of upvoting or downvoting AOC so that we can show how powerful our group thinks she is. And then you're going to have a chance to vote her for the left or the right on the map. Now, once again, we're going to do all this in the chat. So if you think she should go up in terms of upvoting, write up in the chat. And if you think that she should go down, write down. And also, if you think she should move sideways in one direction or the other, write left or right in the chat. So we're doing this because we want to get a sense of where you all think she should be, and then we are going to reveal where we place her on the map based on where our other groups have typically placed her in this exercise. Everybody with me? All right. And also, here's the thing. There is no limit on voting, so just let her rip. Let us know what you think. Vote as many times as you want, and we'll see if a pattern emerges. So let's go ahead and see those votes in the chats. Where do you think she lands on this power map? Now, just for the sake of time, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and put AOC on the power map. Now, this is based on where other people have tended to put her on when we have run this exercise before. So see if it matches where you think she should go. Now, also, if this makes sense to you, I definitely want to hear about that. Or if you don't think that she's not that high or she's not that low, tell us that too. We really want to make sure that we are getting a good consensus on where we think her power lies. Okay. All right. Yeah. So as you can see, she's pretty high, but also pretty to the left too. So she has a considerable amount of power. And for a sophomore, I don't know if we would call her a sophomore or a freshman, but as a relatively new member of Congress, that's pretty great. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to another person to put on our power map. Someone else that we were able to recognize. Oh, it's Nancy. Nancy from California. All right, so let's go ahead and figure out where Nancy would land on the power map. Let's see some answers in the chat. Is she particularly high? Does she not have that much power? Does she lean more to the left? I'm pointing to the right. Does she have more power to the right, or does she have more power to the left? Where does Nancy go? Okay, Sarah said that she would put her at 5 and up and 3 left, and I'm assuming that was for AOC. Yep. Okay, cool. Let's see where we put Nancy on this power map. Yeah, okay. So as you can see here in juxtaposition to AOC, Nancy is more going to the right of AOC, but also higher, but I would like to say not that much higher in power than Nancy Pelosi. Isn't that interesting? This is also, like, once again, where Nancy and AOC and other people that were other positions, people, organizations that we're about to do, this is where they have said this in the past. This is pretty much a survey sample size, if you will.
Got up to the right,
Right.
according to the rules.
Okay, let's go to our next organization. This is the SEIU. This is the Service and Employees International Union, so very prominent union in the United States. Where do you think that? Where would you all put SEIU on this power map? Okay, I see some people in the chat saying up to right. I would put Nancy up high and in the middle. Yeah, and that's pretty much where she was too. So great observation there. And I'll give you all a few seconds to catch up with SEIU. All right, let's see where SEIU lands on this map. All right, yeah, so SEIU falls lower on this power spectrum, but also toward the left as well. Not as left as AOC, which honestly tracks. So as you can see here, these are where these pieces fall on this power map. So you're able to gauge how much pull people have from here. All right, do we have another one? The Movement for Black Lives, one of my favorites, my faves. This is an organization and a rather grassroots organization, so it'll be really interesting to know where the Movement for Black Lives lands on a power map. So let's see where they land on this power map. Okay, as you can see here, Move for Black Lives is right around in the same general area as SEIU. They are further left. Probably the most left, just by a little hair of AOC, but they're also the lowest on this trajectory of power as well. All right, let's go to the next example. David Plouffe. I've met him. This is a political consultant, Democratic liberal political consultant. So, there's a whole town of them. Let's see where David Pilof lands on this power map. Tracks. David Pilof lands almost squarely in the middle. And this is a little bit of not really a unicorn, but definitely someone who holds a lot of institutional knowledge, holds a good amount of institutional power, but is also pretty middle of the road in terms of power and in terms of ideology. These are the people that typically are just stalwarts in the party. They're just there, and they're guarded after, but also sought after as well. Okay, all right. And thank you for the participation in the chat. This is also really good. All right, CAP, Center for American Progress. Current president is Neera Tanden. This is also a liberal think tank and an advocacy organization. So let's see where CAP lands on this power map. Just like David Pilof and Nancy Pelosi, and actually just in the middle, CAP lands at a certain point in the middle of this power map that, once again, is the same thing. Highly sought after, good amount of institutional power within the establishment of the Democratic Party. This organization holds a lot of credits with a lot of the way that policy moves. So it kind of does make sense that they're in the middle. It's really great observations. I love this exercise. Okay, African American voters. Hi, where do I land on this map? That's actually a really good question. Where do I land? Let's see where I'm at. Let's see where I'm at. I feel like I know. I feel like I don't have a lot of power, but let's see. Yep. Yes, I and other African American voters, as you can see, we are super left. Actually, the most left here so far. But look at where we are in terms of power. Aligned to us is right, but the power, we're down here. And that's a bit of a problem. Aren't we African Americans told in the Democratic Party that we're the backbone of the party, largest voting bloc, largest constituency? But look at where our power lies. This is very real. All right, do we have another one? Oh yes, highly educated voters. Now, remember how we said in the beginning, you can have those intersecting circles. I can be a highly educated voter and an African American voter, which does move my position on this power map, or any other person's position on the power map where it intersects. But let's see where highly educated voters, which is less than 10% of the electorate, lands. All right, yeah. So as you can see, you can definitely see that some of the most powerful people really do end up in the middle. It's really helpful to see where how these relationships go. Highly educated voters are slightly higher on the powerful projection, but definitely squarely in the middle as to aligned with us. Great, yeah. All right, do we have a next one? Oh, Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg, I don't think I need to introduce him, but he is the former mayor of New York and 2020 presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. So let's see where Michael Bloomberg lands. I have a hunch, but let's see. Michael Bloomberg is on his own island of rich, powerful, and just not that aligned with us. And I feel like we knew this, right? But it does really get you to think when you see it on a graph like this. When you see it on a map, he's on his island. That's like Seychelles. I'm not good at geography, but this is an island, and this makes sense in the way that he interacts with the rest of the party. You can also see and make a relationship between where African American voters sit and where Michael Bloomberg sits on his power map. You see that they are worlds apart. So as we keep looking, this is not the full presentation, but as you all keep thinking about the differences between the Democratic and Republican Party, and even the differences between factions of the Democratic Party within it, I will hope that you remember this power map. Okay, I think that was the last one. Oh no, MSNBC. Sorry. Yes, so MSNBC, there's a Democratic left-leaning cable news network. I used to be a avid watcher of Rachel Maddow and Keith Olbermann and all of them. Where are they flying on this power map? Because this, MSNBC does represent media, so it's helpful to see where media lands on a power analysis. Oh, right in the middle. As you can see, once again, if you ask a lot of these highly educated voters, these people who love Cap and Nancy Pelosi and David Pilof, they would probably also tell you that they watch MSNBC on a daily basis, and that's totally fine. See how things align with where we want to be. See how people align where things are in terms of power analysis. This is where we are as a country. All right, so thank you all so much for working with me to build our power map. And like I said, for time reasons, we only chose to focus on the Democrats in this exercise, but we can also do a similar process for the Republican Party that's even more illuminating. Let's go ahead and return to this slide that we started with, our generic power map. Now, when we look at this, we see how power is distributed. On a map like this, power acts as the center of gravity. And it pulls objects towards us, creates clusters. And if you look at the clusters, what do you notice? And I can tell you what I noticed. I noticed that we are sharing the Democratic Party with some powerful forces that are not that aligned with us. And at the Working Families Party, we like to say that we are renting a room in the Democratic Party, but we definitely don't own the house. This is not our house. We only rent here. Our task is to build a political home all for our own, a political home for the multiracial working class, a political home for the many, not the few. All right, so we have some real important business to attend to. The Working Families Party is investing in our election work in communities that normally get cut off from the electoral map. We're investing in the South, where I live, North Carolina. We are investing in building power in local races all over the country. We are invested in creating real change in people's communities, and we are also investing in building a political home that we can call our own. So, taking the long view, we know that we need to invest in turning our movement demands into electoral common sense. We need to ensure that our demands to defund the police and become an irresistible force at the ballot box. We have not overcome all resistance to the Green New Deal or capping CEO salaries, and this is the organizing work ahead of us. And it's not always going to be fought on the presidential stage. Our work is to win 1,000 battles all at once, all over the country. So, that being said, are you down with me to join this work? We envision a political party that is 100% pushed by our social movements and funded by our base so that we are free to show up for our communities without anyone telling us what we can't do. And the truth is that well-connected millionaires and billionaires who are on that same island with Michael Bloomberg, they're experts at taking care of themselves. But working class people are experts at taking care of one another, and that's why we're one for the many, not the few. Working class people, we know how to pull together, and throughout this pandemic, we've shared our extra food and supplies with neighbors and chipped in funds to take care of each other. That's what we do. So today, I am inviting you to join me at the Working Families Party as a member. Now, if you're down to join me, you're just like, yeah, I'm learning some stuff. This is really interesting. I want to know more. I want to do more. I love to fund the police. I want to do that. Join us. Join me. So I'm going to ask you right now to go to WFPUS.org/Lexi. That's me. Now, again, that is WFPUS.org/LEXI. Now, what is a meaningful contribution for you today? Meaningful financial contribution for you today? And even better, what's a meaningful contribution that you can give monthly? What can you throw down to power our movement to face the challenges ahead of us for the long haul? Are you able to contribute 20 or 50 or even $100 a month to us today? No matter what your financial contribution size is, there is room for you in this movement to show up with all that you are and all that you have to share. We see you and we appreciate you and we got you. Again, join me in building the WFP, the Working Families Party, into the party of our dreams by going to WFPUS.org/Lexi. Thank you all so much for spending time with me today and have a great one. Bye, y'all.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Working Families Party track. My name is Steve Hughes. I'm with the Membership Organizing and Radical Education team with the Working Families Party, and I'm here to introduce my colleague, Lexi Coburn, who is the National Radical Education Field Manager. And we've been working together for a little while now, and I'm really excited that she's here today with you. She comes to the Working Families Party having worked at Indivisible and also on the Warren campaign. She ran their training in North Carolina, which is where she's from, calling you from there now. And I am really excited that you all are here and that Lexi is going to take us through this session called The Parties We Have. Go ahead, take it away, Lexi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve, and welcome everyone. We are really glad to have you with us here today. And today, we're going to be talking about the parties that we have, like Steve said. In other words, if you don't understand that statement, when we look at the political system in this country, it is generally described as a two-party system, one or two. And so for this short interactive session, we're going to unpack that a little bit. So let's go ahead and talk about our goals for this session. First, we want to learn about the diversity of the power players that exist within the two parties, or at least close to them. And second, we want to learn a little bit about the interests of those power players and what they do to advance those interests. Finally, we want to develop a multifaceted understanding of political power. What do we mean by that? Well, we want to look at power. We want to look at how power is more than just people and money, as important as those things are, but it's also about controlling political infrastructure and shaping how people think. So let's dig deeper on that idea of developing a multifaceted understanding of power. What gives a person or an organization political power? Now, if you have ideas, I would love to see them, so throw them in the chat. Let's see who thinks so. I'll give you all a moment to type your answers in the chat here. Okay, well, totally fine that y'all don't have ideas. That's all right. We're here to learn. So, but what I think is that, so obviously the first thing that gives someone political power is the ability to win votes, or at least to deliver them to someone else, right? For someone else. This is where the rubber meets the road in terms of measuring political power. And in our country, the ability to win votes is often closely associated with money, either having your own or being able to raise very large amounts of it. However, there is more to it beyond just votes and money. Another way that people and organizations gain political power is by controlling political infrastructure. And that might mean controlling levers of power inside of one of the parties or inside of Congress itself. This kind of power lets you put things on a political agenda, and in a lot of cases, it also lets you keep things off the agenda. Is this starting to sound familiar? And finally, political power also makes itself visible in terms of the ability to shape ideas and the way that people think about the big issues of the day. Some might say this is the ability to shape what the general public considers to be common sense at any given amount of time. All right, so let's just say, what if we were able to draw a picture of what political power here in the United States looks like? What might we draw? If you have ideas, you can put them in the chat. But what I will do is that I will keep looking at this slide here, and this is a picture that we drew. And it's a picture of the modern Republican and Democratic parties. Now, we're not going to go into great detail about this right now, but this picture shows some of the forces that live in these two parties. Now we have everything from elected officials and former party organizations to the media to voting constituencies like white evangelicals for the Republicans and affluent liberals for the Democrats. We also have donors, and we also have advocacy movement organizations. All of these pieces, all of these are just that. They're pieces on this power map. And this power and this picture is placed on this power map as well. This is a tool that organizers often use to assess the power in their communities and to plan their organizing campaigns. It's a tool. As you can see, it's set up as a grid. And on the bottom, on the horizontal axis, we show how aligned various power players in our political system are with us, with the Working Families Party. On the left side, let's say we have people who believe that we should abolish all billionaires, which is yes. And then on the right side, we have power players who believe that what's good for billionaires is good for all of us. Does everyone see that? The way that's being laid out here. On the vertical axis, we see how much power these groups have. Closer to the top is how more powerful they are. And closer to the bottom, the less powerful. I hope everyone understands that. And just to reiterate, higher you are, more powerful you are, lower you are, the less powerful you are, the more left you are, the more left you are, and the more right you are, the more right you are. All right, so we can argue all day about where any one of these groups on this map should be. But for now, let's not quibble about these details. What we really want you to do is take a look at the broader patterns on this map. Now let's take a look at three larger groupings on the map. Now, the first grouping in the upper right-hand corner here is the Republican Party. It's in red. Yes. We would argue that regardless of any particular election outcomes right now, the Republican Party is quite powerful in terms of having very well organized infrastructure and a clear and consistent worldview. It doesn't really change that often. Now, the next grouping here in the middle, this is what we could refer to in shorthand as party establishments for the Democrats. These are the big donors, the bulk of elected officials, consultants, and also voting blocs like affluent liberals. And a final group here, this is where we live. This is where movement organizations and left-wing elected officials live. It's also where the multiracial working class lives as well. So just taking a look at this, I'm noticing just a couple of things here. And the first thing that I'm noticing is that there is some overlap between the circles. Now, we're not talking about solid boundaries. We're human, right? Just simply groups that tend to cluster together in terms of ideology and power to enact that ideology. The other thing that I'm noticing here is that it's pretty obvious that our folks don't have a lot of power. It's not a lot up here for us. This is a little green circle. It could be bigger. But this is also true compared to Republicans. But it's also true compared to the forces that make up the establishment of the Democratic Party as well. So even though it looks smaller, it's actually not that small. So here is another version of the power map, and typically my favorite. We want to go ahead and get more concrete with all of this. So we're going to make our own effort to place this onto this power map with several real life power players. Now, of course, if we had more time, we would map out both the Republicans and the Democrats. But for now, we're only going to concentrate on the Democrats because true to form, there are a more complex situation in terms of our understanding of how political power is distributed. Now, so we're going to go ahead and get started with someone who is super familiar in terms of, and for all of you, if not most of you, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC, as she is affectionately called. As you can see on this slide, we're laying out two things. We're laying out what her interests are and what means does she have to achieve those interests. So for example, AOC's interest is pursuing policies for the many, not the few, That sounds familiar. And in terms of her means, she has a huge social media following at her disposal to achieve her interests. I can go on TikTok or Twitter at any given time, and she's talking about policy to a whole bunch of millennials, which is exactly where we want to be. I am going to give you all a few seconds to just look at her and look at the card and to think about where on the power map you think she should go. So I'll give you all a few moments to figure out on this power map that we'll see in a second where she should go. It's totally understandable that, like, upon viewing a power map for the first time, that you're like a little stumped, but let's just go ahead and go through it. So the way that this is going to work is that you're going to use your chat to have the option of upvoting or downvoting AOC in terms of the power axis, right? To show how powerful our group thinks that she is. And you're also going to have a chance to vote her to the left or the right of the map. I did it backwards, but you know what I mean. The left or the right of the map. All right, so I'll get, and again, we're going to do this all in the chat. So if you think she should go up, write up in the chat. If you think she should go down, write down. And if you think she should move sideways in one direction or another, left or right in the chat. Okay, yeah. So let's go ahead and look. Oh, we have a couple of responses here. Norma says she should be in the middle. Okay. All right. What's going to happen here to make this as interactive as possible is that you're going to give me these responses, and I'm definitely going to take them into consideration, but you will see in a moment where, because we've done this before, and our participants have pretty much a good sample size of where they think that these power players should go. You're going to see it on the slide in just a moment. Okay, awesome. So based on other times we've run this exercise before, this is where other people have put her on our power map. So as you can see, this is pretty high for a semi-new person in Congress to be on. Pretty powerful, but also pretty left. So this is an elected official that is pretty aligned with us, holding a considerable amount of power. Now, if you think this makes sense in the chat, let us know. Or if you disagree, you can tell us that too. But for now, we're going to go to Nancy Pelosi, a more senior person in Congress, I'm losing my words, a politician who most of us also know decades of service work. So where do you think, I'm just going to give you all a moment here, where do you think that Nancy falls on this power map? Okay. Let's just go ahead and move forward here, but let's see where Nancy landed in our previous presentations of this power map. Yes, Norma said up, and Nancy did go up. That's exactly right. Nancy is center up, so that means that she is even more powerful than AOC, and also not bad line with us. She's kind of in the middle. As we go through the next few power players and organizations and media outlets and things of that nature, you're going to start to see a little bit of a correlation on where people are and where they aren't, and how far apart they are from each other. All right, so let's go to the next one here. Service Employees International Union, or SEIU. This is a labor union representing 1.8 million workers. Let's see where SEIU falls on the map. Okay, so SEIU falls pretty more in line with us and Nancy Pelosi, but not as in line as AOC, and lower in terms of power structure, even though they represent 1.8 million people in the United States, which is, you would think is a considerable amount of power. But remember, people, people and money always don't represent what we think power is. Cool. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one here. The Movement for Black Lives, a network of dozens of local and national organizations committed to Black liberation. This is one of the grassroots groups that we're going to examine here, and let's see where they fall on the map. Move for Black Lives is a little further, just a smidgen further left than AOC. But as you can see here, they're even more aligned with us, but have less power. So as you can see, less power is a line to the left, but it's really down here in the corner too. So just to think about like what they're able to affect, even though they're a network, how much power are they able to actually exert? Okay, let's go to the next person here. David Plouffe. I've met him. He's a political consultant. David Pilof is like central to party establishment work in the Democratic Party. So let's see where he falls on this power map. I have a hunch, and the hunch was in the middle. That's exactly right. David Pilof is actually very, very center, which means a lot, but also not a lot of things. He is in the middle of the road. Remember when we said earlier that what's good for billionaires is good for us? This is one of the people that probably believes that, just because, like, I met him, but we're not friends. I don't know his ideologies like that, but I do know from the power map, he does believe that, because look how centered he is on this power map. He's powerful in a sense and aligned with us in a sense, but it's not as close as we'd like it to be. Okay, next one. Center for American Progress, also known as CAP. Current president is Neera Tanden, liberal think tank and an advocacy organization. So let's see where CAP finds itself on this power map. CAP is right there in the middle too, a little further down than Nancy Pelosi, literally in the middle between Nancy and David, which makes a lot of sense. This is what you are viewing here. This correlation is typically referred to as the party establishment in the Democratic Party. When we were talking about that earlier, this is it. Cool. Thank you all so much also for participating in the chat. I do see that. Norma's got it right now. Norma got it. Awesome. Let's see where African American voters land. Hi, by the way. Where do I land on this map? Less than 12% of the presidential electorate. That's not interesting. I had a hunch, but I didn't really know. African American voters, much like the Movement for Black Lives, land very aligned with us to the left. In fact, probably hard to the left, but also just so little power. There's not a lot of power here. And if you think about this power map is a tool to help you understand a little bit more about why that is. Because remember, African American voters are referred to in the Democratic Party as the largest voting bloc, the backbone of the Democratic Party. 97% of Black women vote Democrat just about every presidential year in the last 3 or 4 cycles. But why is the power so low? This is the reason why we have these tools, because we got to figure it out. Highly educated voters, less than 10% of the presidential electorate, so smaller than African American voters. Where do they land? So highly educated voters, and remember, there's no solid boundaries here. Some of these post-it notes are going to really intertwine, and this is one of them. You can be an African American voter and a highly educated voter too. Highly educated voters, for the generality of them, land pretty also centered with Nancy Pelosi, David Plouffe, CAP. They land that center, and they don't have a ton of power, but if you notice, slightly more power. than African American voters. And as you can see here, voting blocks don't have a ton of power. Most of them are down here on the bottom of the axis. People means power, right? Why can that be? See who else we have. Michael Bloomberg, CEO and owner of Bloomberg LP, former Republican and independent mayor of New York City, and also 2020 presidential candidate. Let's see where Michael Bloomberg lands on this power map. Michael Bloomberg is on an island. He is on an archipelago somewhere else that is not the United States, right? He's in Seychelles. He's over here. He is not aligned with us. He is almost a diehard. That doesn't say that. My apologies. He's over here on an island. He's not near Nancy Pelosi. He's not that near David Pilof. He's not that near AOC, and he's on a different world than African American voters and movement for Black Lives. And we have to understand that he exerts a considerable amount of power, and in fact, just about the same power structure as AOC, but in a different world. And also see where the establishment is. Establishment is surely in the middle, and you have these two forces on its left flank and right flank. This is how you can also understand you can understand the way things unfold in our democratic world. Also, we have MSNBC. We absolutely have to incorporate the media into this discussion. And MSNBC is a Democratic-leaning cable news network. I used to watch it. I used to like to watch Rachel Maddow. Where do MSNBC land? Where's Joe Manchin? Also on an island somewhere too. MSNBC, pretty true MSNBC, falls in the center as well. Exuding a good amount of influence, actually, and that's going to be kind of normal in terms of media organizations. They are there to exert influence and information, which equals power in a lot of cases. So just think about like why MSNBC is that high on it, but like you have voting blocks that are much lower. And to answer your question, Norma, where Joe Manchin, if we can stay on the slide for just a second, where Joe Manchin would probably align on this map is somewhere, I would say right around Michael Bloomberg. I would actually put him a little bit higher, just a little bit higher than Michael Bloomberg in terms of where we are right now in Congress, but who knows? Steve, do you have an option? Do you have an opinion?
I would put him really high right now because of the balance of power in Congress, that he's a deciding vote and he can basically swing things completely his way.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And if you look at where Joe Manchin was in 2018, when he wasn't exerting this type of influence, he didn't have the stage to, be blocking things or not blocking things, right? He would be much lower in our perception of his power. But because Congress has shifted the way it has, he's able to actually exert a lot more power and influence than he had in previous years. Great question, Norma. Thank you so much. All right, let's move forward. Thank you all so much for helping me to build our power map. But let's go ahead and return to this overview slide that we started with, the power grid map. Now, when we look at this, we see how power is being distributed. And on a map like this, power acts as a center of gravity. Just put everything in the middle, and it pulls objects toward it. This creates clusters. Now, if you look at clusters, I notice a couple of things when I look at clusters. I notice that we are sharing the Democratic Party with some powerful forces that are not that aligned with us. They don't really speak for us. And here at the Working Families Party, we like to say that we are renting a room in the Democratic Party, but we definitely don't own the house. I don't really know them. I do, but we don't really kick it. I'm not trying to play spades with them, but I live here. Our task is to build a political home all of our own, a political home for the multiracial working class, a political home for the many, not the few. So now we have some real important business to attend to. The Working Families Party is investing in our election work in communities that normally get cut off for the electoral map. You know those states. We're also investing in the South, where I live. Hi, here in North Carolina. And we are investing in building power in local races all across the country. We're also investing in creating real change in people's communities. And lastly, investing in building a political home that we can call our own. So when you want to take the long view, we know that we need to invest in turning our movement demand into electoral common sense. We will continue to ensure that our demands to defund the police become an irresistible force in the ballot box. And we have not overcome all its resistance to a Green New Deal or to capping CEO salaries. We see that it's moving, but it's not where we want it to be. Not in a case to really make this the party of our dreams. So this is the organizing work ahead of us, and it's not always going to be fought on the presidential stage. It shouldn't. Our work is to win 1,000 battles across the country all at once. So are you down to join me in this work? We envision a political party that's 100% pushed by our social movements and funded by our base so that we are free to show up for our communities without no one telling us what we can and can't do. And the truth is, well-connected millionaires and billionaires like, Michael Bloomberg over there in Seychelles, they're experts at taking care of themselves, and good for them. But working class people are experts at taking care of each other. Working class people, we know how to pull together, and throughout this pandemic, we've shared our extra food and supplies with our neighbors and chipped in funds to take care of each other. So today, I'm inviting you to join me at the Working Families Party as a member. Now, if you're down to join me, if all this sounds good, you learned something, I really want to know more, things of that nature, I ask you to join me. And I ask you to go right now to wfpus.org/Lexi. That's me. Again, that is wfpus.org/LEXI. Think about what a meaningful contribution for you is today. And even better, what's a meaningful contribution that you can give monthly? What can you throw down to power our movement to face the challenges ahead for the long haul? Are you able to contribute 20 or 50 or even $100 today? No matter what your financial contribution size is, because we accept it all, there is room for you in this movement. And it's room for you to show up with all that you are and all that you have to share. We see you, we appreciate you, we got you. So once again, join me in building the Working Families Party into the party of our dreams by going to wfpus.org/Lexi. And thank you so much again. I had a lot of fun. And I hope to see you all again soon, and have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Hey, everybody. My name is Steve Hughes. I'm with the Working Families Party on the membership organizing and radical education team. Really happy you're joining us. And it's my pleasure today to introduce to you my colleague and comrade in this work of doing political education, Lexi Coburn, who has recently joined the Working Families Party team as the National Radical Education Field Manager. She comes to WFP having worked for other organizations, including Indivisible, and running the training work for the Warren campaign in North Carolina, where she is currently calling you from. Um, so we're really happy that you're here, and I'm really happy to pass it over to Lexi to take us into this presentation on the parties we have. Go for it, Lexi.
Thanks so much, Steve, my comrade as well. And welcome, everyone. We're really, really glad to have you with us here today. And before we start, I just want to ask, where's everyone calling from today? It's cool to be virtual because we're all spread out. But where are you calling from? Let's see you in the chat. Type where you are calling from. I'll see your names. But like Steve said, I'm in North Carolina, Durham to be specific. So I love being in this nice little bubble here in the South. But where's everyone calling from? I'm gonna give you all just a moment to see where you're at. Don't be shy. Everyone else was shy. To be completely honest with you, I used to be super shy too, so I totally understand. I got you. Whenever you want to talk in the chat, it's cool. We're here. So today we're going to be talking about the parts we have, like Steve said. Oh, Mercedes calling in from Texas. Hey, Mercedes. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the parties we have. And that, in other words, when we look at the political system in this country, it is generally described as a two-party system, either one or two. So for this short interactive session, we're going to unpack that a little bit. So let's talk about the goals for this session. First, we want to learn a bit about the diversity of the power players that exist within the two parties, or at least close to them. Second, we want to learn a little bit about the interests of those power players and what they do to advance those interests. Finally, we want to develop a multifaceted understanding of political power. And what does that mean, Lexi? True. Well, we want to look at how power is more than just people or money. And as important as those things are, it is also about controlling political infrastructure and shaping how people think. So let's dig a little deeper on that idea of developing a multifaceted understanding of power. So I would love to see in the chat some ideas around what gives a person or an organization political power. If you have ideas, throw them in the chat. I'm happy to keep reading as they come in. If we move forward, that's cool. But let's see, just pause for a second and see some answers about what gives a person or an organization political power. So some of the answers that I have about what gives a person or organization political power is the ability to win votes, or at least to be able to deliver them for someone else, like an electoral organizer. And this is where really the rubber hits the road when it comes to measuring political power. Now, in our country, the ability to win votes is often closely associated with money, either having your own or being able to raise large amounts of it. But of course, there is way more to votes and money than what we're talking about here. Another way that people and organizations gain political power is by controlling political infrastructure. And that might mean controlling the levers of power inside one of the parties or inside of Congress itself. And this kind of power lets you put things on the political agenda, and it also lets you keep things off the agenda. One person in our previous session mentioned Joe Manchin, which is a really, really great example of what I had just said about that kind of power inside of Congress and the way that it's controlled, that infrastructure. Finally, political power also makes itself visible in terms of the ability to shape ideas and the way that people think about the big issues of the day. And some might say that this is the ability to shape what the general public considers to be common sense at any given time. So, what if we were to draw a picture of what political power in the United States looks like? What might we draw? We will definitely draw this picture here. This is what we drew. And it is a picture of the modern Republican and Democratic parties. Now, we're not going to go into this in great detail right now, but this picture shows some of the forces, just some of the forces that live in these two parties. Now, we have everything from elected officials to former party organizations to the media to voting constituencies like white evangelicals for Republicans and affluent liberals for the Democrats. We have donors, and we also have advocacy movement organizations. Every single piece is a power piece on this map. Now, this is actually called a power map, and it's a tool that organizers often use to assess the power in their communities and to plan their organizing campaigns. So as you can see, it's set up as a grid, as it should. Along the bottom, on the horizontal axis, we show how aligned various power players in our political system are with us. So on the left side, let's say that we have people here that believe that we should abolish all billionaires, which, yes, if I was a person, I'd be on the left side because I also believe that this is the way that works. Now, on the right side, we have power players who believe that what's good for billionaires is good for all of us. I'm not over there, but there are some people who are over there, and that's cool. Does everyone understand that? On the vertical axis, we see how much power these groups have. So closer to the top, you're going to have it's going to be more powerful. Those are the more powerful people, and closer to the bottom, the less the powerful. Do we see how this axis is? I think I just like to dance. We could argue where any of these groups on this map should be, and for now, let's not quibble about those details. What we really want you to do is take a look at this as the broader patterns on the map. Now, we're going to go ahead and look at three larger groupings on the map. Kind of bring this in a little bit. So the first grouping in the upper right-hand corner is the Republican Party. It's in red. This is how we traditionally spot Republicanism. We would argue that regardless of any particular election outcomes right now, the Republican Party is quite powerful in terms of having well-organized infrastructure and a clear, consistent worldview. Doesn't change that often. Now, the next grouping here in the middle, this is what we would refer to in shorthand as the party establishment of the Democrats. Now, these are the big donors, the bulk of the elected officials, consultants, and also voting blocs like affluent liberals. This is where they live. And the final group here, this is where we live. This is where movement organizations and left-wing elected officials live. And it's also where multiracial working class lives. This is where that voting bloc and that general constituency lives. So there's a couple of things, if I'm looking at this, there's a couple of things that I notice. And the first thing that I notice is that there is some overlap between the circles. And it should be, because we're not talking about solid boundaries, just simply groups that tend to cluster together in terms of ideology and the power to enact that ideology. That's why you see those circles, and that's why it intersects with the circle in the middle of the Democratic Party, the party establishment. That makes sense. The other thing that's really obvious to me looking at this power map is that our folks don't have a lot of power. And this is talking about that green bubble. That's us, and we don't have a lot of power. This is true compared to Republicans as well, but it's also true compared to the forces that make up the establishment of the Democratic Party. Now, so we have another power map. This is like my favorite one. And we want to go ahead and use this to get concrete about all of this stuff so you can really visualize what we're talking about. We're going to make our own effort to place onto this map several real power players. Real live power players. There it is. If we had more time, we would map out both the Democrats and Republicans, but for now we're going to focus just on the Democrats because they're a more complex situation in terms of our understanding of how political power is distributed. So let's look at someone that we all know. Super familiar. This is Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC as she is affectionately called. As you can see on the slide, we're laying out two things. We are laying out what her interests are. And some of her interests here are policies that favor the many, not the few, which sounds familiar. Building power to make that possible, and changing the narrative to make that common sense. These are the interests that Representative Ocasio-Cortez holds. And what we're also laying out here are the means. And these are the means that she has to achieve those interests that she has as well. So, for example, AOC's interest is pursuing policies for the many, not the few. But in terms of her means, she has a huge social media following at her disposal to achieve those interests. If her interest is policies that favor the many, not the few, she also goes on TikTok and Twitter and talks to millennials like myself about these policies so that we can bridge these gaps. She does good work. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go through and we're going to look at different interests and different means for different people. And then we're going to see where others who have done this presentation before has put these people on the map, on the power map. So as you see here, there's a Blade power map, and I'm going to ask that we show where AOC lands on this power map here. Now, she lands here. I'm going to explain the axis and where this is going right now. So remember, as we said before, the horizontal axis is how aligned the person is to us at the Working Families Party. So as you can see here, AOC is left aligned. She's not full left, but she's pretty left, which means that she has active support and she's with us. She understands. She's right here. That's great. So then we look at the vertical axis. You see how powerful she is and how powerful she isn't, right? And this is where also people who have done this before, where this lies, where they thought AOC lies. And as a semi-new-ish person in Congress, a congresswoman herself, she lands pretty powerful on the spectrum. This is the 8 out of 10. It's pretty high. And it's because of the way that she utilizes her means to get to her interests. She holds a good amount of power there. So is everyone with me so far? So this is definitely where we think AOC is aligned with us. And definitely, if you agree with this, let's see in the chat. If you don't agree with it, let's see that in the chat too. This is always an open discussion on where people think that power players land on a power map. But it's all to really exemplify and dig into how these systems unfold in our political two-party system here. What needs to change and what needs to change for the better and what needs to be abolished. Give you all a moment to see if I have some agrees or non-agrees. Non-agrees may not be a word, but we're just going to keep going. Okay, cool. That's totally cool too. I'm going to take all that as, yes, girl, you got it, and heard. Let's go to Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, this is a person who has multiple interests, electing Democrats so they are in the majority. She also tends to believe that the best way to do this is to run moderates who can self-fund in swing districts and for the Democratic Party to avoid getting a reputation as being too liberal. She also wants to pass policy that she has championed throughout her career, rights for women, LGBTQIA+, expanded healthcare access and pro-environmental legislation. She does this throughout her very long career. And also she wants to support her home state. She wants to support her home state, including the tech business in California, which makes perfect sense. So what are her means? How does she execute these things? This is access to donors. This is control over the infrastructure of Congress itself, committee assignments and things like that. That's her, I think that we understand generally that if you're in charge of a committee assignment, you hold a good amount of power. And this power also gives you the avenue to have control over the agenda. Remember, as we said in the beginning, sometimes if you manipulate power in a certain way, you'll have power over how things in Congress unfold. And also some of the means that she exerts are to control over important parts of the infrastructure of the Democratic Party, especially the D-TRIP. We call the D-TRIP is Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the House Majority Super PAC. She has a lot of means that she's able to exert this power over in order to serve her interest. And also, of course, fundraising for the groups advancing Black liberation. These are all the means in order to execute these interests and really bring these interests to life. So, knowing all this, where does she fall on the power map? Let's go ahead and see that. All right. So Nancy falls higher on the power spectrum. In fact, just about one of the most powerful people that we'll put up here. And also, she lands really centralized. And that makes a ton of sense. Most of her means and her interests are rather in the middle of ideology of the Democratic Party. So it makes perfect sense that she is here in the middle. Awesome. All right. Let's go ahead and go to the next one here. Service Employees International Union. This is SEIU, as it is shortened, a labor union representing 1.8 million workers. This is also their interests, advancing the interests of the workers they represent, especially higher wages, better benefits, and more advanced working conditions. And also they want to grow their membership. The means in which they try to get to their interests is a large and diverse active membership, engaging in collective bargaining, lobbying in elections. They are very present and becoming even more present in electoral campaigns, and not just like presidential campaigns, but also like Senate races, governor races. They do exert influences on these levels as well. They also donate to candidates and spend money on general voter mobilization. Once again, we're exerting influence and power through other means. And then also they use political power to create more favorable conditions for organizing workers. So knowing that a lot of their base influences are serving others, where do they fall in the power map? Let's see it. So you're going to notice a trend. You're going to start noticing that organizations are going to fall pretty low on the power, but more aligned to us. SEIU falls a little further down than AOC in terms of power. They're kind of like centralized in that power stage, but they are also more left aligned. So what that means is that SEIU is way more likely to agree with us than Nancy Pelosi will, but we're kind of gonna go over here to the AOC party because we know for sure that she's aligned with us. There really could be not too much of a question there. All right, so we have next on our docket, we have the Movement for Black Lives, one of the grassroots organizations that we will examine here. It's a network of dozens of local and national organizations committed to Black liberation. Thank you. Their interest, their almost singular interest, is translating the eruption of protests over police killings of Black people into a durable movement for social transformation. Pretty, clean cut there. And the way they do this, their means, high visibility mobilization, training and political education, coalition building among Black organizations and with other left forces, fundraising for groups advancing Black liberation, and the vision of Black Lives Policy platform. When you read through these means really heavily align with the Working Families Party. But let's actually see where they land on the power map. The Movement for Black Lives is going to be one of those organizations, one of these entities that are more aligned with us than most things, than most other people or organizations. And that's good. You're going to want to have people who are aligned with you so that you have a trust there. And that's how you're able to exert even more power. If you're aligned with me, then you're with me, and then you're going to keep walking with me. And that's exactly what we want. So, but also, as you can see there, the Movement for Black Lives, we're getting further and further away from the center where Nancy Pelosi is. But let's see how that's about to change. So then we have David Pilof. David Pilof is a political consultant. I've met him a couple of times. This is a consultant who believes as politics as business, becoming rich by electing Democrats. Yeah, that's his main interest, and that's where he stands in that. He's going to be visible on a lot of establishment electoral campaigns and like influencing a lot of the way that campaigns hit the ground in terms of their electoral work. So, definitely understand that going into looking at other campaigns and how they're operating. David Poloff has many, many means of trying to get to his interests. Poloff's been a political consultant, a corporate lobbyist, and a nonprofit leader. He is the one that also managed Obama's 2008 campaign. And as a consultant, he made more money the more expensive campaigns were, because campaigns have steadily been increasing since 2008. There's nothing to do with Obama, but it just has been over the years. In fact, North Carolina is a state that we have some of the most expensive Senate campaigns in recent history, and Democrats lost both times. Campaigns that can afford to pay consultants lots of money usually raise that money from the other wealthy and powerful. And because of his relationships and his record of advising politicians in a pro-corporate direction, he was rewarded with a Silicon Valley corporate lobbying job, a nice little setup. And from there, a multi-billion-dollar foundation that advocates for pro-tech industry solutions to social problems. So, he was able to do this type of work, organizing in his way via consulting in order to kind of build a little bit more of an empire that branches out further. Let's see where he lands, because I have a thought. I think that he lands exactly near Nancy Pelosi. If you remember Nancy Pelosi's interests and her means of executing those interests, they really do align. So it makes perfect sense that they're pretty aligned with each other. Does David Poloff have as much power as Nancy Pelosi? No. But they are aligned, which means that Nancy's going to have him on his team, and for all intents and purposes is on their team. All right, let's see the next one here. Center for American Progress. The current president of this nonprofit is Neera Tanden. This is a liberal think tank and advocacy organization. Their interest is serving as the main policy generator for the National Democratic Party, generally advancing policies that will align with what powerful figures in the party will help elect Democrats to keep them popular when they're in power. So just to liquidate that down, Center for American Progress sees the trends, creates policies that keep on those trends, and more importantly, puts those policies in a certain position so that the Democrats can keep getting elected and keep staying in power. As you can see, there's a big component of that that's not listed, which is, what do the people want? The means of how CAP, as it's called, tries to get to their interests is generating policy ideas and proposals through research, some of which shapes broader narratives. They also control what policies then pursue through their relationship with powerful figures in the Democratic Party, such as Nancy Pelosi. Basically, the factory where the governing program of the Democratic Party gets produced. And CAP was founded by John Podesta, former Bill Clinton chief of staff, Obama senior advisor, and Hillary Clinton campaign chair. In tandem was also Clinton's policy director. So as you see, these are like the Hollywood sign stars of these party establishments. And they're all kind of getting together here at CAP to influence and push these policies onto the Democratic Party, really branding what the party is about. And they're successful in that. Let's see where CAP lands. CAP is very aligned with the party establishment here, a little further down on the power spectrum, but above David Pilof, who is just one of the consultants in like just this general cluster of consultants that are for the Democratic Party, coming out of establishment politics. All right. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit here. We're talking about African American voters. Hi. This is less than 12% of the presidential electorate. So African American voters, please, we know to be true, the African American voters are not a monolith. You're going to see some variation here. But generally, the interest of African American voters is seeing government advance policy that helps people meet their needs. It's pretty clear cut. The means of which is African Americans are the most reliable voting bloc in the United States. We've heard this time and time again. Over the last 4 to 6 years of the electoral cycle. Electing African Americans and allies to office and perhaps the Democratic Party congressional leadership where they can use infrastructure to advance policy. And also their means is through social movements, social media. Black Americans have shaped narratives in extremely important ways. We wouldn't have the Move for Black Lives had African American voters not stood up and demanded change. We wouldn't be this far. Imagine what a power map would look like had it not been for African Americans really exerting their displeasure and desire for different policy and different change. I would imagine that Nancy Pelosi and CAP and David Pilof would be a lot further right. But the work of African American voters and people who align with African American voters have been pushing establishment party politics left. How far left is also, of course, under speculation. But let's see where African American voters fall on this power map. When we were describing the interest and the interest and the means of African American voters, it really did seem like African American voters exert a lot of power and influence. But look at where they are on the power spectrum. They're pretty low. They're not too powerful. We are not that powerful. We are that powerful. But in terms of this map, the way that we are exerting political influence that equates into power is pretty low in comparison to the rest of the people on this power map. There's lots of reasons why this happens, but also look at how closely aligned African American voters is to the Working Families Party. That is a big piece and really a really foundational piece as well. So let's see who else we have here. Oh, highly educated voters. As we saw in the other power map where you have an overlap, you can absolutely be we don't have solid relationships here. There's no solid boundaries. You can absolutely be an African American voter and also a highly educated voter. Those two things can be true at the same time. But for this, highly educated voters are less than 10% of the presidential electorate. Their interests include leaning progressive, in part because this group includes lots of people in the public service industry, like teachers and nurses. And also some of their interests is education that also correlates closely with income and more affluent professionals who don't want to pay high taxes and want to send their kids to exclusive schools, so on and so forth. The means in which they try to execute these interests, and to make sure these interests come to life. Since this group is trending toward Democrats, it is a major place for Dems to pick up new votes, and therefore Democrats are eager to respond to their concerns. And just because we're not like identifying Republicans doesn't mean that Republicans don't also have that same energy to get votes from highly educated voters. If you look at exit polls, that actually has been happening. This group also isn't necessarily giving millions, but they can give some money, and that's a good way to get listened to. These are also people that you'll see on like volunteering on electoral campaigns, volunteers exerting influence inside of other nonprofit spaces. Like highly educated voters are around. And lastly, people in the media, like in think tanks like CAP, tend to be members of this group and see the world through the same lens. So because you see the same lens, and then we're talking about think tanks and kind of like establishment politics, where do you think they land? Let's see where they do. Boom. As you can see here, there's a trend between voting blocks and like think tanks and like British elected officials, where think tanks and elected officials, consultants are going to be much higher on a power axis than these voting blocks are. And like we have to think about why that is. But for now, highly educated voters are really centralized, but they're lowly centralized. They are not that aligned with us, but there could be some movement here. It's not like clear to the left. It's not clear to the right, but it is in a certain place where we may not appeal to highly educated voters, but we can get like one or two. Hey, that's a win too. So let's see who else is up here. Michael Bloomberg. I think we all know who Michael Bloomberg is. Former Republican / independent mayor of New York, 2020 presidential candidate. Michael Bloomberg's interest, other than having just a conglomerate of an organization, action on climate change, but also a very pro-corporate kind of climate change that does exist. Gun control and gay rights, and also his interest in minimal regulation on corporations, especially Wall Street. He made his fortune by engineering a kind of computer that every bank in the world uses. So this is just corporate. It's corporate. It's very just, once again, corporate. The means is that Bloomberg is worth $55 billion, which makes him the 8th richest individual in the United States. And in 2018, he spent almost $100 million helping to elect Democrats. And also, like I said before, Bloomberg owns a media empire, and he funds all sorts of organizations that loudly echo his view on the world. This is someone who's going to hold a lot of power, not just because of who he is, it's because of what he possesses, which is money. And that money will turn into influence like that. So he also has influence because he owns a media empire. We're going to talk about media later, but he owns it. He owns one of them. So just imagine how high he's going to be on the power map. Let's see where he is. Michael Bloomberg is on an island of power and influence and control all on his own. It's Seychelles. It's like the federated states of Micronesia over here. He's over there. He's in two different worlds from where African-American voters live, this multiracial working class block of voters. We're over here on the left, and Michael Bloomberg is probably the most right person we're going to have on this Democratic slide. And that's just because of all the money and all the power that he harnesses. And yes, he does use money for Democratic campaigns, but if we're looking at where he is and how close he is to like Cap and Nancy Pelosi and David Pilof, even though he's helping to elect Democrats, he's not taking a lot of notes from the party establishment. So imagine how that power gets kind of like changed for his doing. Then you start to understand how policy unfolds within the Democratic Party as well. Who gets elected, who gets support to try to get elected. Speaking of media, we have Msnbc up here too, Democratic-leaning cable news network. Highly educated voters, this is their jam. Watching Rachel Maddow at 9 p.m. is like an event. This is what they do. And we have like this kind of home base of a cable news network for all things liberal leaning. Interest is a for-profit media outlet, and it makes money by selling advertising. So its interest is getting people to watch, like almost any media network. Where does MSNBC fall on this power map? Let's see it. Yeah, that sounds right. It's going to land somewhere in the middle. All right, cool. I think that is the last one here. So thank you all so much for just sitting with me as I talk through the power map and see where these powerful players land. And like I said, for time reasons, we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it for Republicans, but believe me, there's even more illuminating things to be had when we map out power structures within the Republican Party. Well, let's go ahead and start talking back to this power grid map. Now, when we look at this map, we see this is how power is distributed. Now, on a map like this, power acts as a center of gravity. It pulls objects toward it, and it creates clusters. And if you look at clusters, I've noticed a couple of things. I noticed that we are sharing a Democratic Party with some powerful forces that are not that aligned with us. We don't really talk to them, but we share space with them. So the Working Families Party, we like to say that we are renting a room in the Democratic Party, but we definitely don't own the house. We just live here, girl. I don't know what they're doing over there, but we just live here. This is our space. Our task at the Working Families Party is to build a political home all of our own. A political home for the multiracial working class, and a political home for the many, not the few. So now that we got to this part of our presentation, we have some really important business to attend to. The Working Families Party is investing our election work in communities that normally get cut off the electoral map. We're investing in the South, where I live, where we definitely need some more infrastructure and some investment. And we are investing in building people power in local races across the country, creating real change in people's communities, and building a political home that we can call our own. And taking that long view, we know that we need to invest in turning our movement to demands into electoral common sense. And we will continue to ensure that our demands to defund the police become an irresistible force at the ballot box, because we have not overcome all the resistance to the Green New Deal or to capping CEO salaries. There's so much work to still do. But we also have come so far, because this is the organizing work ahead of us, and it's not always going to be fought on the presidential stage, as it should not. Our work is to win 1,000 campaigns, battles all at once across the country. So, all that being said, are you down to join me in this work? You should be. It's really fun over here because we envision a political party that is 100% pushed by our social movements and funded by our base, so that we are free to show up for our communities without anyone telling us what we can do and what we can't do. That's a freedom. That's a liberation. And the truth is that, the well-connected millionaires and billionaires like Michael Bloomberg, they're experts at taking care of themselves, and they do. But working class people are experts at taking care of each other. Working class people, we know how to pull together. And throughout this pandemic, we've shared our extra food and supplies with our neighbors and chipped in funds to take care of each other when we need it, when other people need it. So today, I'm inviting you to join me at the Working Families Party as a member. I'm a member, Steve's a member. We're asking for some more members. So if you're down to join me, to join the hottest party in town, I ask you to go right now to wfpus.org/Lexi. That's me. Again, that is wfpus.org/Lexi. Think about what a meaningful contribution, what that looks like for you today, a meaningful financial contribution. Think about what that means, what that looks like to you. And even better, think about what a meaningful financial contribution monthly is for you. What can you throw down to power our movement to face the challenges ahead of us for the long haul? Are you able to create $20, to contribute $20, $50, maybe even $100? You want to show off? Give us $100. I'm impressed. No matter what your financial contribution is, though, there is room for you in this movement to show up with all that you are and all that you have to share. And we see you and we appreciate you. We got you. So, again, join me in building the Working Families Party of our dreams, and join by going to wfpus.org/Lexi. I want to thank you all so much for spending time with me. This has been wonderful. I hope you learned some real good stuff, and we'll see you later. Have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.